Hi. Okay, we're recording now. This is Alison here from the Southern Cross Postgraduate Association, and we're having a terrific presentation from Megan Lee. Megan is a Senior Teaching Fellow at Bond University, and today she's going to be talking to us about systematic searching for literature review, which is like an essential skill really for every postgraduate student. So I'll hand it over to Megan now.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for taking time out of your Friday to come and listen to my little workshop on systematic searching for postgraduate studies. A little bit of background on me. I have just finished my PhD, so thank you. Yeah, in December I finished officially, and then in June I was passed for examination. So it can take quite a bit of time once you are actually finished. So my PhD was in nutritional psychiatry here at Southern Cross. And I was offered a role, a full-time tenured role at Bond University this time last year, so 12 months ago, so about 6 months before I finished, which was very exciting for me. So I have very recent experience in what it takes to do a postgrad degree, and sort of I'm really passionate about sharing the tips and tricks that I have to make some of the things that we do in postgrad studies easier. And when I talk postgrad studies, I don't mean just PhDs. I also mean masters of research, masters unit type stuff, grad dips, ed Ds, anything that's kind of postgraduate, these tips and tricks will work for. So it's not just for PhD students. So it looks like we have around 8 people today. So we might go around before we dive into everything, and we just introduce ourselves. So we have one person who has come face to face, which is very exciting. Do you want to introduce yourself, who you are, what you're doing, what's the postgrad studies you are doing?
Yes. My name is Now, what I'm doing today isn't linked to a particular form of study. What a colleague and I are doing, and another colleague from the University of Southern Queensland, is we're part of a UAC grant proposal, and it's looking at integrated assessments, looking more into that area. And what we are looking to do is to do a systematic literature review of that area.
Very
what
cool.
Are integrated assessments? What is best practice? So when I saw this, I thought this is exactly the kind of advice I need. So while ours is more looking to harness these skills for a project that we would hopefully produce a literature review and present.
Yeah, perfect. So that's really good, because I learned all my tips and tricks from this, actually doing a proper systematic review for my PhD. And then I branched out into collaborations with others in health at SCU. And I think I've published 6 different types of reviews. So I've done an umbrella review, which is a systematic review of systematic reviews. I've done many scoping reviews, which is kind of the first step in systematic searching and systematic reviews, and I've done a few proper systematic reviews with meta-analysis as well. So and the type of systematic search that you do, or the type of systematic review that you do, will depend on what happens after the process that we see today. So this is always the first step, and then you decide, okay, so this is the research that we have, and this is the type of review that would suit that research. So this is always the first step that we take. Now, I might ask the online people to, one at a time, put your microphone on and introduce yourself and what postgrad studies you are currently undertaking. So, David?
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Well, I'm actually doing a coursework master's in business law, and I've previously done coursework master's in business psychology. And once you start, you start thinking, oh, where does this go next? So I'm just exploring and looking around different parts of SCU and getting a feel for what's involved, and having not been a student for 30 years, these kind of webinars are really helpful to know how things run.
Great. Thank you, David. Valeria?
Here we go.
Hello.
Hi everyone. Yeah, so I'm just at the first stage of my PhD. So I just recently started. So I'm just at the beginning with everything, and I'm doing, the project is focused on 3 species of dolphins out of the coast of Queensland. So it's like marine biology, ecology. So we're looking at like population, abundance, distribution, and yeah, at the moment I'm based in Adelaide though, because my second supervisor is here. So I'm starting here at Flinders University. But yeah, I'm enrolled at the Southern Cross University based in Lismore. Yeah, so I'm in the office with my co-workers. I just went now here at the tea room to introduce myself, but then I go back there. So okay, if I would be mute, that's why.
Okay, okay. Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Mia?
No
Hi, I'm doing a Master of Teaching at SCU, and I'm not working on any thesis at the moment. Today, I would like to know more about how to search effectively. So I hope I can work on my design more effectively next time.
Great. Thank you, Mia. Gary? Maybe. Okay, Gretchen?
Hey, at the Lismore campus. Yeah, we're just working at a remediation site near Kempsey, looking at mining contaminants. And a master's by research.
Very cool. Thank you. Louise?
Hi, I'm a PhD student. I'm based in Lismore, working from home at the moment. My PhD is about farmer decision making with a focus on intuition. And I'm kind of in my last year almost, and I've already done a massive literature review, but I've got to do like some little, I just want to redo like my minor ones, and I wanted to follow a proper process for those, because like my first one was just like, just go and explore, follow your heart and find what, find your path. So I found my path, but yeah, now I would like to like make some academically viable literature reviews that were, had a methodology.
Perfect. I think that's how we all start doing
good
reviews like that, so that's not a problem.
I was like, what? There's a methods for these? Oh my God.
There is, but you don't find out till later.
Yeah.
Thank you, Louise. Gabriella?
Hi, sorry, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm doing master's by research, and my research is based on ecological restoration in koala habitats.
Very cool. Thank you. Elizabeth?
Hi.
Hello.
Sorry, it's a bit bright here. I'm up in Townsville at the Australian Institute of Marine Science. I am doing a master's by research looking at thermal tolerance in coral symbionts. So part of the coral, basically holobiont, it's a symbiotic organism that lives in the coral, but basically trying to improve thermal tolerance in corals. And I'm really hoping to be able to narrow down my literature searches a bit, because what I'm doing is very, it's very difficult to find papers that are basically relevant to what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Because there's so much out there and so many different ways that you can go with this kind of research. And so I'm just hoping to be able to be more effective in my literature searches and not have papers that I read, 5 minutes into and realize it's not actually what I wanted it to be.
Sure. Excellent. Well, I hope that I can help today with that. Thank you so much. All right. So we might get started then. So what is a systematic search? And I think it was very interesting where Louise said we usually start out our research journey by just either Googling or looking at Google Scholar or using the SCU library to just do a overall search for our topic. And then writing sort of a narrative type literature review introduction for our research. And that is a good way of doing it at the beginning when you're reading widely to understand your topic. But when it comes down to writing a proper literature review or a systematic literature review, there is a little bit of a method that we can follow. And it just means that you're not going to miss key articles for your topic. So a systematic search is basically the systematic identification of relevant research findings. It involves constructing a research question in a very scientific way, using keywords, understanding your inclusion-exclusion criteria of what you would like to find. And Elizabeth was just saying that there is such a broad range of literature on her topic, and this is where the inclusion-exclusion criteria step can really help with that, not including anything that's not relevant, and having a proper inclusion-exclusion criteria is very, very important. It will help you to find where to look and how to search effectively. Now, this system is normally used when conducting systematic literature reviews or meta-analyses, but I use this whenever I do anything. Any type of literature review I need to write, I will do this systematic searching. In fact, I now teach my undergrad students in first year psychology how to do this from the beginning of their course, because I didn't learn this till I was in my PhD. And I was like, wow, this would have been so beneficial for me throughout my undergrad and into my honours year. It would have been like, it would have saved me so much time, and so many rabbit holes that I went down would have been avoided if I had have known this system. And everyone knows the feeling of going down that rabbit hole where you're like looking for papers and then you find a really interesting paper in the reference list or as a citation, and you go to that and then you find another one that's really interesting in that reference list, and you end up somewhere in China with your topic, somewhere nowhere near what you were actually searching for. So this will help with that. And a lot of my students actually say that when they learn this in undergrad, it definitely stops that kind of rabbit hole research happening, which is exciting. So this is the process. Very simple, very easy. The first thing that we do is we develop a research question. Now in health, which is what I'm in because I'm in psychology, we use what's called the Pico. Now, I will explain the Pico in a few slides, but it is very health-based, the Pico, but I will show you other types of acronyms that are for different areas like law, business, education, biology, things like that, that you can use what I teach you today and apply it to your industry. So that's the first thing. Develop your research question using a Pico. Identify synonyms and related terms that are relevant to the keywords in your search. Then you identify the databases that are relevant for your search. And you use truncation and Boolean operators to broaden and narrow your search. Now, this will help Elizabeth, because it seems that with a very wide expansion of literature, that once you start narrowing your search using truncation and Boolean operators, it will help you to really get a more narrow papers that are more relevant. The next step is identifying your inclusion and exclusion criteria, and then sorting and storing your literature. So let's go through that process. So first of all, in this workshop, I'll spend probably the first hour or so explaining the process and using an example from my PhD. And then the second half of the workshop, I'll actually get you to do the process on your topic. And so we are being very actively in the CU library doing the steps so you can replicate it when you want to afterwards. So the first step is to create a Pico. Now, this is very helpful as I said before. One second, let me just try and mute everybody who is not muted. If everyone could mute, that'd be great. Thanks. Perfect, thank you. Okay, so Pico basically stands for the 4 areas that you are going to use to search for your topic. In health, they are population, patient, or problem as your P. So that's the people or the thing that you are most interested in. Intervention or exposure. So that is kind of what if anyone knows what an independent variable is in research, that is your independent variable, or what you are changing or manipulating. So the intervention or the manipulation. Your comparison is what is the opposite of your intervention? Sometimes there is no comparison if you're looking at straight, almost census type data, but then the comparison just becomes no intervention. So the intervention versus the control, or the intervention versus no intervention, or exposure versus no exposure. And then finally, our outcome. And our outcome variable is often called the dependent variable. It is the variable that we see the outcome in. So you've got your population, you've got your intervention or your exposure, you've got your comparison to the intervention, and then you've got what the outcome is that you want to see. So in health, it's like, who are the patients? What is the population of interest? What you do to them? What is the comparison to what you do to them? And then what happens to them, basically. That's for quantitative research. Qualitative research, which is looking more at words and experiences and people's perceptions or opinions, follows a population problem, interest, and then context. It usually doesn't have an outcome. Now, outside of health, we have other searching frameworks such as Eclipse, which is expectation, client group, location, impact, professionals, and service, which is focused on health policy information. Spider, which is focused on qualitative and mixed methods research, so sample, phenomenon of interest, design, evaluation, and research type. And then we have Spice, which is focused on the evaluation of specific interventions. So setting, perspective, intervention, comparison, or evaluation. Outside of health, you might need to look up the other acronyms for law, business, education, things like that. But everybody has a searching framework to develop. Now, we use our searching framework in this way to develop a research question of interest for our systematic search. So for my PhD, I was interested in how dietary patterns impacted depressive symptoms in the general population. So when I was doing my Pico for my searching terms for my PhD, I was looking at a population of adults, so the general population, so not elderly, not under 18, not children. I was looking at adults, so just the general population. And the intervention that I was interested in was whether or not a healthy dietary pattern rich in fresh fruits, nuts, seeds, legumes, whole grains, could impact depression symptoms. And then the comparison to that was an unhealthy dietary pattern. So something high in ultra-processed, refined, sugary foods. So my Pico was adults. The intervention, or what I was interested in manipulating, was healthy dietary pattern. The comparison was unhealthy dietary pattern, and my outcome was depressive symptoms. So to take your Pico or your Eclipse or your Spice and form it into a research question is the next step. So just doing this and identifying that that's what our interest is for our topic, you can then develop a research question around it. So the research question for me was, what is the association between healthy dietary patterns, which is intervention, compared to unhealthy dietary patterns, which is the comparison, in adults, which is the population experiencing the symptoms of depression, which was the outcome. Now, one of the really important things that I stress to my students who I'm supervising at the moment is that when you do any form of research, PhD, research collaboration, masters of research, anything, and you are working on a very big topic like this, you want to take your specific research question that you've developed from your Pico and put it on a Post-it note and tape it to somewhere near your computer screen, so that when you feel like you are going down that rabbit hole, you can read the paper and go back and be like, is this answering my research question? Is this related to my research question? And the rest of the steps in the systematic search should also help for that not to happen. But it's a really good tip, always coming back to the research question at hand that you have developed specifically from your Pico. Okay, the next step in systematic searching is to identify synonyms and related terms for your population, your intervention, your comparison, and your outcome. So here is a little table of an example of this. So for this example, the patient or population was people who have had abdominal surgery. So the search terms were abdominal surgery, and then you need to think of as many synonyms as you can for other ways of saying abdominal surgery. So surgery, post-operative recovery. Intervention was chewing gum. So chewing gum or gum was like the synonyms. There was the comparison was just not chewing gum, so there was no synonyms for that. And most of the time it's best to leave your comparison out unless it's very specific. And outcomes. The outcome was post-operative ileus or paralytic ileus or ileus. So to go back to my example, can you give me some synonyms for let's start with our intervention. So healthy dietary pattern. What else could we put in as a synonym for that? Yeah, good. Healthy foods. Nutrition's a good one. What else? It's tricky, isn't it? Now, because I've read the literature widely, I know that there are some other ways of naming this. So healthy diet, dietary quality is also another one. Mediterranean dietary pattern is considered the world's healthiest diet. I would even throw in vegan and vegetarian dietary patterns into that one. And then your comparison. So unhealthy dietary pattern, how else would we say that? What are some synonyms? Poor diet, what else? Bad diet. We could throw junk food in there. Yep. Eating habits. And then what about our outcome, depression? What are some other synonyms for depression? Good. Mental illness, mental health, well-being. But we also need to think about depression itself is said in many different ways in the literature. So depression, depressive, subsyndromal depression, anhedonia, alexithymia, all these words mean depression. So to find all of the literature that you need for your topic, you've got to really, really think about these synonyms. Now, one of my biggest tips is when you get to this stage, once you've developed your Pico and your research question and you get to the synonym stage, book a interview or book a meeting with the SCU librarians. They are amazing at this, and they will come up with synonyms that you don't even think of. They are gold. So every time I do any type of literature review or scoping review or systematic review, when I get to this stage, I book an appointment with the SU librarians every time. In fact, there is every systematic review paper that you ever read will always say, these two authors did the identified synonyms and related terms in consultation with a librarian every time. So you see it in papers. So it's like also gives you a bit of credibility when you're writing this up for publication in a journal. So very good. The next thing that we do is we identify relevant databases. My favorite is EBSCO, but I've just found out that SU doesn't have that anymore, but that's all right because we've still got Medline, CINAHL, PsycInfo, and PubMed. Now, obviously, these are all health relevant databases because that's what I search in, but my friends in education, business, and law have told me which ones are relevant for those areas. So in education, we have Academic Search Premier, ERIC, Education Research Complete, and Teacher Reference Center are the best databases to be searching in. In business, you've got Business Source Premier, ProQuest, and Emerald. And in law, you've got ICLR, Lexis, and Westlaw are the best databases to be searching in. Excellent. So what we might do at this stage, oh no, we'll keep going and then we'll go and I'll show you an example with using my diet and depression stuff. So truncation and Boolean operators, hard to say, but very effective. So the librarians will also help you with this. They are wizards at truncation and Boolean operators. They know this inside and out. You don't have to be an expert in how to use these to have an effective systematic search because that's what the librarians are here for, basically. So use truncation to avoid having to think of and type out all variations of a word. So diet with an asterisk behind it will include in the search diets, dietary, diet quality, dieting. So you only have to put diet and the asterisk and it will take up all of those words. So we'll just add all of the types of dietary words behind that. Same with depression. So remember we said depression, there's depressive symptoms, there's depressive, there's all these different synonyms. If you put DPRES with a asterisk behind it, it will include all words such as depression, depressive, depressed, depress. Now they work in side words as well. So if you have a word that has American and English spelling, like color, if you put the asterisk where the U is, it will include all spellings, UK and English spelling and American, which is great. Then we've got our Boolean operators, which sit in the middle of our synonyms. So basically we want to look for, say, dietary pattern. So our healthy dietary pattern. And in the first line, we want dietary pattern, or we also want all papers on the Mediterranean diet. Now you can see there med also has a asterisk behind it, and that will pick up Mediterranean, med diet, because med is sometimes just used instead of Mediterranean. Now you can see in the synonyms that are two or more words are covered or surrounded by quotation marks. That means that they will find that those two all together. So that's very important to do. But if it's just one word, you don't need that. So dietary pattern, or Mediterranean diet, or Western diet. That's our ultra-processed unhealthy diet, or healthy diet, or unhealthy diet. So we're looking for our interventions and our comparator there, or our comparisons. So we want all the papers on that have dietary pattern, or Mediterranean diet, or Western diet, or healthy diet, or unhealthy diet, and also include depression or anhedonia or melancholy. And they're all our keywords and our synonyms for our intervention and our outcome. Now, if I wanted to break down my search to adolescents rather than adults, which I haven't done yet, that would make the P of the Pico different. So what could we write in there would have another and? So we want dietary pattern and depression, and then we want to reduce it down to adolescence. So what other synonyms could we put in there if we were looking at an adolescent population? Teenagers, yeah, so we do TEE and asterisks, now to pick up teens, yes, youth, young adult even. What else? What other words do we have? Potentially, yep, good. So the and includes all the elements of the Pico. So your population and your intervention and your comparator and your outcome. And the ors tell you which synonyms you would like to be included in the full line for that, for each line of the Pico. Okay, so the next step in the systematic searching is the inclusion exclusion criteria, which I highly think is the most important step. And you need to think about exactly what papers you want to include in your search. So having a proper inclusion exclusion criteria is very important. And when you do write up a systematic search or a systematic review or a scoping review for publication, you need to outline how you did all of these steps. Each of these steps needs to be outlined in the methods section. And that 2 people did this separately, independently. So 2 researchers must always do this independently if you're going to publish. If you're just doing it for your PhD or for your literature review, you don't have to worry so much about that. But for publication, it must be done in duplicate by 2 independent researchers. So inclusion exclusion criteria, you've got to think about like what age range am I looking at? So with adolescents, what do I consider as adolescence? Is it 18 to 25? Is it 12 to 21? And when you do decide what age range you are using, you need to have citations to back that up. Why this is the inclusion of that age range. Of course, if you're not using human studies, your population might be polyps or corals or dolphins. You need to really have a clear definition of what the population of that animal or species is. So rather than participants or problem, it's more along the lines of the population of choice of the animal or the bacteria or whatever. Then you've got to think about the recency of the literature, and this needs to be backed by citations as well. So if I'm doing like my study on dietary patterns and depression, I know from reading widely and doing my PhD that the first paper ever written on dietary patterns and depression was published in 2008. So I would limit my search from 2008 until 2022, just because the literature supports the fact that there was no research before that. And if it wasn't highly regarded. It was like something that isn't included in the dietary pattern and depression literature. So if you have a population or you know something about your literature, if you're doing something in tech, for example, and it sways on when the internet started, go and find out what that date was, and your search should be from that date until now. If it's a topic that spans the total test of time, you can do what's called from inception, which is whenever the first paper was ever written until now. But you need to have a proper justification for why you're doing that. You have to make sure that you tick a box that says whether or not you're using human or animal studies. So if I wanted to do in my diet and depression stuff, I didn't want to include any of the animal research that's happened on mice or rats, then I would make sure that my inclusion criteria was human studies only. And then this is a bit of a topical one, language. A lot of people exclude anything outside of English. I don't. In fact, a scoping review that I'm doing at the moment on body image satisfaction in the postpartum, we didn't do English language as an exclusion, and we have 2 papers in Brazilian and 1 in Spanish, and we're just trying to find people to translate them for us, because we are worried about missing some key elements of the literature just because we can't read it in English. So that's very commonly seen, where people exclude anything that's not in English. I don't think it's a good practice, but if you're not able to get translations for papers, then there might not be any point in getting literature that's outside of English. And then the final one, a big decision that has to be made about, and this will depend on what field you're in, whether to include only peer-reviewed scholarly articles and books, or you're happy to include grey literature. Now, in education, it's very common to include grey literature because there's so much stuff out there in manuals and handbooks that have been published that aren't peer-reviewed but are very, very good for systematic and literature reviews. So you just have to explain why you're doing that. In health, usually we just go peer-reviewed and scholarly articles. Unless it's a topic that has nothing, has very few things, you can then say, doing a scoping review, there's nothing peer-reviewed on it, but here's all the grey literature that is on it. My PhD student is currently looking at that in authenticity in the LGBTIQ community, where there is actually no current research on that, but all this stuff in the grey literature. So she's doing that at the moment. Other inclusion exclusion criteria that you might need to take into account is exposure of interest, geographic location of the study. That's very common, maybe in the dolphin studies. That sounds like geography is a big key exclusion criteria. I think it was the Queensland coast. Reported outcome, setting, study design. When I did my umbrella review, part of my inclusion exclusion criteria was that it was only other systematic reviews and meta-analyses that I was reviewing. So I excluded any primary research and only included secondary research. But in most other literature reviews or systematic reviews, you exclude secondary research and only include primary research. So that's something that needs to be taken into account as well and written all into your methods prior to conducting your research. Now, another thing to bring up, if you are planning on publishing a systematic search like this, one other thing that you need to take into account is registering it with a repository. So once you've done all these steps, you go to something like Prospero and say, we're going to do this literature review or this systematic review. These are our criteria. This is the steps that we've followed, and you give them kind of a methods section. And then that way, no one else can do that review while you're doing it. And it protects you from anyone duplicating what you're doing while you're doing the research, which is excellent. And they will also tell you if anyone's ever done anything too close to what you've done already. So it's a really good way of doing a check. And then when you go to publish, there's a little line that says all systematic searching criteria were developed a priori, and you can find that here at Prospero, and you put a little link to that, so that when you do publish, people can go back and see, well, this is what they said they were going to do at the beginning, and this is what they did at the end. So it's just a website. Okay. Yeah, you just type in Prospero and then you say, and you click a button that says register my literature review. It's really simple. Yeah, it's completely free. Yeah, it takes a while, but yeah, it's pretty good. They currently don't do scoping reviews, which is annoying. So we just put it through Open Science Framework when Prospero says no to that. So there's many repositories now. And usually when you go to publish something like this now, they will ask whether you registered your methods prior to publishing. So, cool. So let's have a little bit of a look in the SCU library. on how to go about doing the actual search itself. So all of that stuff that we just did was kind of the setup and the process and what needs to be put into your method section when you're writing up something like this. And all the next part will be more practical stuff. Now, what I like to do is when I get my Pico and my search terms, I like to do a Word document like this because it's so much easier to copy and paste it from a Word doc than typing it every time, which is what I did at the beginning when I first started. So Word doc, usually at the beginning of the Word doc, I put in all my search terms, my Pico, my research question, my inclusion, exclusion criteria to follow, just like a little code book of what I'm doing so I don't forget, because I do a few of them at the same time. And then in the Word doc, I have my search strategy, which is what this is. So we're going to go and do this in the SE library. Hopefully I can copy and paste from the screen. We'll see. We'll see. So my search terms will be in the form of a Pico. So intervention first, outcome second, and then population last, but it doesn't have to be in that order. It's just how I've done it. So our intervention, nutrition or diet or dietary pattern or diet quality or Mediterranean diet or Western diet, and depression or depress or psychological distress or low mood or self-rated depression, and adolescent or teen or young adult or pubescent. That's going to be our search terms. So let's go and have a look. Yes, it's going to let me do it. Woo. All right. I'm pretty excited about that. So let's go to the SCU library. Can everybody see that online? Has it gone from the slides to the library? Anyone?
Yep.
Oh, perfect. Okay. All right. So the first thing that we do now, this is where we usually search for our articles, but that's going to give us way too many and not anything that's refined. So we usually go to the databases, which is directly underneath the search term box. Now, there are many different databases, and SEU is really clever in that they have sorted it, and this is due to the amazing librarians that work here. They've sorted it by subject area. So there's business, there's arts, there's education, there's the health and human sciences, your Indigenous knowledge, law, science, engineering, SEU college is in there, and tourism. So if you don't know what databases are relevant to your area, you can just click on that and it will come up with all of those. You can also, if you know the database's name, you can search alphabetically. And you can also use Google Scholar from SEU now, which is awesome. So my favorite is EBSCO, but I think we lost EBSCO. Things are always changing. Oh no, there they are. Awesome. It just wasn't there last time. So the reason that I like EBSCO databases is because it includes, instead of going to 4 or 5 databases and doing a search, EBSCO includes them all in one place. So it is a requirement of a systematic or a literature review that you look at more than 3 databases for your key search terms. So usually we do that manually and we go and do these this key searching in 3 different databases. But EBSCO gives us the opportunity to do that in one place, which I love. And my current university does not give us the opportunity to do that. So I'm always come back to SCU to do my data searching. So it's a very good opportunity. And I think it's because the librarians here are so amazing. They've set that all up. Okay, so these are the EBSCO databases. So I want to look in, so academic search premier is education, but I want to look in the health and the psychology ones. So I would choose allied and complementary medicine database. Yeah, why not? Synal is a health-related database. So by clicking on these, it's going to do our search terms in all of these databases. There's education, not interesting. Engineering, not applicable. ERIC, another education one. Health business, no. health source, hospitality and tourism, humanities, library, just find the ones that are relevant. Medline, very relevant to psychology, so we would tick on that. APA, psych articles, also super psychology relevant, so we would click on that. Psychology and behavioral sciences collection is also, and APA psych info. So you just click on the databases that suit your area in EBSCO and continue. Now this will bring up an advanced searching box. Now these fields are the fields for your Pico, for each element of your Pico. So the first element of our Pico was, got to find my, here we go. Yay. So my intervention, the nutrition intervention. Back to the library, copy and paste. So you can see how important the Word doc is going to be. When I first started doing these, I would type everything manually over and over and over. Very silly, very silly. So I want to find these words not in the full article, otherwise we'll end up with way too many. I just want articles that have these terms in the abstract. Now, of course, you can, if you don't get enough, you can widen it to the full text. And if you get too many, you can reduce it down to title even, or keywords. But you can find any part of the document that you want to search in. I like abstract. It's my go-to. Then we look at our outcomes. So depression was our outcome. So we take all of our keywords and our synonyms for our outcome, and we put it into an and box.
Yeah, so do you need the parentheses?
The parentheses?
Yeah, on the search terms that you've got.
No. Okay. I don't think so. Some, when you use it in Scopus, which is another database, it doesn't have these advanced boxes. So you have to put them in parentheses in that. In Scopus, that's why they're there. But some librarians do, some librarians don't. So why don't we run it and see what happens when we do and when we don't? Might give us different numbers. And then our population, which was adolescent, our adolescent population. So we pop that into the final box. And we want to find all of these in the abstract. Now, down the bottom are our search options, which are our inclusion, our exclusion criteria. And this is why it's really important to have those really firm in your mind before you get to the searching stage, so you can pop them in. So I would like everything to be peer reviewed. And I want all of the publications to be from 2008 to now, because I know from the literature that's the range of what the literature should be. Anything else special? And this will break it down to, after your main ones, it'll break it down to the specific databases that you chose. So this was Synal, gives you some options if you want it in English. Our human studies, because we don't really want animal studies. And you just click all of the inclusion, exclusion criteria for your studies. So as you can see, there's so many that you can choose. You can also exclude your secondary studies here. So you're not looking for other systematic reviews and meta-analyses. And then we click on search. Now I'm assuming there's going to be a heap of these. Yep, so we've got 584. That's not too bad. Sometimes you get millions and you're like, help me. So that's when you go back and you have to refine your synonyms. Take some out. Maybe you're looking for too many words. Refine things down if you get too many. 584 is actually very manageable. And then you have a look whether or not, and most of them won't be relevant, which is great, but you have a look at what you've got. So here we've got the first one is dietary patterns and internalizing symptoms in children and adolescents and meta-analyses. So if we had made part of our inclusion criteria that we weren't looking at secondary resources, we would exclude that. We would say, no, that one doesn't apply. It's not within our inclusion criteria. The second one, again, sexual and gender minority adolescents disordered eating. That doesn't really have anything to do with healthy dietary patterns and depression. It's kind of out there. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to just go through and eliminate them haphazardly. So there is another process that we take at this stage. So what we do is we go to page options and we do the maximum results per page. For this one, it'll be 50, and then press apply, and that will show us, of the 584, it'll show us the top 50. Then we go to, I think it's in page options. Where is it? In here. Yes, okay. So you want to add all these 584 references into a folder. And what we're going to do is we're going to export all the citations to your EndNote or your Zotero, and we're also going to export them, the title of the authors, the title of the paper, and the abstract to an Excel file. And that way you can do your sorting by within Excel instead of inside of the databases, which makes it a lot easier. So you add them to the folder, then unfortunately you do have to scroll all the way down the page. Now this is pretty neat. So because we've looked over many databases, there's going to be duplicated papers within the databases, but doing it this way actually removes the duplicates automatically. You don't have to do it yourself. So this is really handy. So share, then results, the 51st to the 100th paper, we'll put it into the folder. I don't know why they don't have an option to have the page numbers at the top, but, and then you continue to do this, 100 to 150, next. Then 150 to 200. That works hopefully. Next. 200 to 250. I promise this will be worth it in a second. When I first found this out, I was very excited how this works. 250 to 300. Next. And then writing all these numbers down is also very important if you're going to publish, because you'll have to do like a little figure of how many you started off with. So the 580, then you'll have to say how many you had after duplicates were removed. So 350 to 400, so that'll be in your Prisma. Then you'll say how many you ended up with after you did, you excluded papers by title and abstract. There we go. So exact duplicates have been removed. So we started with 580 papers that were relevant, and now we have 422 papers. And they're all sitting in our folder currently. So the next step that we take is we go to our folder view. And we select them all. And then we export them to 2 places. So we do I do this Excel file first, but it doesn't really matter which way you go. So download CSV, which is an Excel file. Make sure this up here says 422, so you haven't lost anything. And then you save it, and it will create an Excel file that's got the author, year, all of the information. I end up getting rid of most of the columns except for abstract, title and author, and then I go through and I exclude anything that's not relevant in the Excel file. But then you can also export all of the citations to EndNote or Zotero. This is really awesome as well because you could do the title and abstract actually inside of EndNote, which I have done before. And then all your citations are in there and they're PDFs, which is amazing for every one of the papers. Now, oh, David, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, just wondering if you know of these other databases that you referred to earlier. Do they all have these facilities to do this exporting and editing?
Yep, every single database has the same option menus to do all of this. So this is not just EBSCO. Some of them have more tricky advanced search options that you have to get around, but again, going and sitting with a librarian, if you get stuck, is really a great idea. They'll teach you how to do this. They'll sit with you and actually do it with your data. They've done that with me so many times. Yeah, librarians love it. They love being involved. So they are so good here. Yeah, definitely do not be shy. It is one of the steps in my process every time. I do not ever do this without a librarian helping me. So yes. All right. So let's quickly go back to, once we've done this, the next step, once we get it all into our Excel file or into our EndNote, because you can do it in either, is you want to eliminate any irrelevant literature by title and abstract. And then you will have your full text of the articles that you are interested in for your actual literature search. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop for a little bit before I talk about how to use the literature to write a literature review and answer any questions about the Pico process or the process of searching. Keeping in mind, we're going to go through this with your own topic very, very shortly. So does anyone have any questions? No? Okay, I will keep going then. Please do put your hand up. I just can't see them. So if you just holler at me, I'm like, I just can't see anybody's hands. All right. So the next step, once you've got your full text, and usually you end up with anywhere between 3 and 30 papers, depending on how wide or narrow your inclusion exclusion criteria was. Now, I highly recommend getting this data extraction table and saving it somewhere on your computer. I wish I had have known how to do this way before my PhD. This would have helped me out in my undergrad. It would have helped me out in honours. It would have helped me out so much. But I found out like at the end of my PhD how to do this. So this is another one of the things that I'm teaching all my first year students, because it improves their writing so dramatically in a literature review in an introduction. So data extraction table, basically when you get your full text articles that are all relevant, sometimes you find out that they're not relevant at full text, but that's okay. It gets smaller and smaller as you go along the line. When you get to the data extraction table, you basically extract the author, year, country in the first column, what the research aim of the paper was, what type of study, so whether it's cross-sectional, longitudinal, an RCT, qualitative, and then your characteristics of your participants or your population. So ages, type of participants, mean, gender splits, things like that. Keeping in mind that's not always going to be humans in that column. It's whatever your population is or what your sample is. Then you've got research design. So that's different to type of study. So type of study is like qualitative, quantitative, cross-sectional, longitudinal. Research design is how it was done. So for example, the top paper is a cross-sectional study, but it's a cross-sectional online survey. So the research design is online survey. The one down the bottom is a qualitative paper, and it's a focus group paper. So the research design is focus groups and then split across where and what. So you provide a little bit of detail about the research design. Then you talk about the findings. What did they find? Provide statistics if you can in there. And then a column on limitations, strengths, limitations, and future research of the article. Now, once you've done this for all 20, 30 articles that you've got, you will then have the ability to compare and contrast the papers against each other in a way that you can't do when you're just writing a literature review and you've got all the papers kind of everywhere and they're not together. So this is a really amazing tool for being able to improve your literature review by being able to compare and contrast, especially that limitations and future research column, because you can see what kind of quality they are. So even from this, what's in this data extraction table, we've got the first paper is a cross-sectional online survey of 165 vegans and 54 vegetarian adults. The second study is a longitudinal study across time over 25 years where diet quality was measured every 3 years and there was 14,000 Australian women. The last study is a qualitative project, a focus group project with 50 staff and students at Southern Cross Uni. Now you can already see across these 3 different articles how different they are and how you can compare and contrast them in a literature review and provide your reader with far more context than just saying, this study said this study said that, and they have to rely on your interpretation of what is in the articles. So when comparing and contrasting the literature, use the data extraction table to write your systematic literature or narrative reviews. In the introduction and literature review, when you are reporting findings or you're talking about studies, always describe the type of study, what country it was from, the number and type of participants or samples that were involved, what their findings were. And it will improve your scientific academic writing. And then you can also use the data extraction table in the discussion section where you're talking about how your findings are similar or different to other studies in the field, because you can use that strengths and limitations column at the end there to discuss, well, this paper was of very high quality. It had a lot of strengths, very little limitations, but this other paper kind of had its methodology, it had flaws in the methodology. So it also gives you an ability to really extenuate the discussion. Say, we found this other paper found this, but it was only a qualitative focus group of 5-10 people. Whereas what we found was in 14,000 women across 25 years. So that column, that limitations future research column is amazing. And it will also help you when you get to the end of your discussion and you're super burnt out and you're like, I can't think anymore, but I have to figure out what's going to be good for future research. You can just go back through your column, see what all the other papers said and be like, okay, so there is a consensus here that there's no RCTs in this field. And that's what's needed. So it really helps you scaffold your argument in your discussion as well, which I find amazing. So here's a little bit of an example of what I just told you, but how to write it into your actual literature review. So, and this is using my papers inside of a literature review. So rather than saying this study said this study said that, it's better to provide all the elements of the data extraction table in your sentences. So a recent cross-sectional survey study conducted by Lee et al. 2021 on 165 vegan and 54 vegetarian Australian adults examined the association between plant-based diet and depressive symptoms. they found that a high-quality plant-based diet was associated with decreased depressive symptoms, while a low-quality plant-based diet was associated with increased symptoms. This was similar to an Australian randomised control trial of 56 adults that assessed whether changing from a low to high-quality diet caused depressive symptoms to decrease. And that was Jacker et al. Paper in 2017. In this intervention study, 36% of those in high-quality diet group were no longer classified to have depressive symptoms at the end of the 12-week trial, compared to only 8% in the low-quality diet group. Now, you can see how when you like describe things like in this way, by just using the elements of your data extraction table, it's giving the reader so much more context of the quality of the papers, rather than just relying on your perception or your interpretation of what you have read and taking that as true. Using words in between each of the studies, like similarly, differently, in contrast to, comparatively, is how we knit them together. And when I teach this to my first year students, bless their souls, you get like big chunks of like cross-sectional survey study, Lee et al. In Australia found this. Then this paper, randomized control trial, found this, and they don't have any of the linking words. And you can see it's just like they've tried really hard to do the data extraction table, but they're still not knitting or braiding the sentences together. And that's the next skill in doing that. So those words, similarly, differently, in contrast to, I had a list of them pegged to my desk in my PhD because I used the same one over and over. So here's another example. So, however, a longitudinal study examining diet, depression, food security, and diet quality found, so however is the linking word, that the overall quality of the diet of 14,000 American women over the past 25 years did not meet recommended national guidelines for whole grains, dairy, and fiber, and surpassed upper limits for saturated fat, refined grains, salt, and sugar. This finding was contradicted by a qualitative interview of 10 women in Iran conducted by Sargent that found women reported eating the required amount of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes, and rarely ate refined and ultra-processed foods. So as you can see, those are two conflicting findings, but we know that the study on 14,000 American women has probably got a little bit more, is better, can't think of the word right after this, than a focus group of 10 Iranian women. So it's just, yeah, it's got a bit more academic or scientific rigor behind it. 14,000 women compared to 10. So, and this is a really good example of why using this, the data extraction table is going to help you in doing that. Yes. Okay. So any questions before we move on to the next part of the workshop where we use your actual topics? David's got a question. Yes.
I'm kind of guessing that the data extraction is a manual event, as in reading and reading and reading and reading. Right.
Yeah, and it kind of stops you from reading and never writing because you're just taking the key elements out of each of the papers. So it really helps with that. Any other questions? Yes, good question. Covidence is a software package that you can do all of this in, and it is amazing. SCU doesn't support it. I recommend it highly. Bond supports it. SCU doesn't support it yet, but if you all get together and ask them for it. There is a free trial, but you can only use under 500 as long as you've got under 500 papers, which you kind of want to be under 500 anyway. So you could get to that stage where you've done the search in the databases and you've excluded by title and abstract to get it under 500 and then put it into Covidence. Now, the benefit of Covidence is that the whole process that I showed you today is contained within this software program. And 2 or 3 researchers can be doing each of the steps, which we have to do independently anyway in duplicate, and it all shows up in like different colors, what the other researcher has included or excluded by title and abstract, what you've included and excluded, and where your consensus isn't matching, and then you have a chat about it. So these are all the more intricate processes when you do this in a team rather than when you're doing it by yourself. But the first time I got shown covenants, I was like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this manually for years. So it's very, very good. And then if you're in collaboration with someone at a university where it is supported, you can just use their logins. But I definitely would recommend trying to get the postgrad students to ask SCU if it's something that they would be happy to support. Because they do SPSS and they do in vivo. So if they know something's on the market that would be very beneficial to postgrad students, I'm sure they'd be very happy to include it in the package.
That might be part of it. They get enough.
Yeah. Yeah, and it will streamline the process completely and make it a lot easier. And hundreds of staff are doing systematic reviews here, so I don't understand why that wouldn't be something that they would be happy to do, considering it's a research-driven university. Yeah. Any other questions? Oh, there's so much in the chat. Okay. Let's have a look. I'm going to go through the chat and just see if there was any questions in there. Gary's mic wasn't working. Oh, yeah, good. Answers to my questions. Excellent. Good job. Oh, you did very good. Why is it that adding and gives me more results instead of less? So adding an and gives you... It's a strange, because there's more papers out there, and I don't know why. That does sound weird.
Yeah, it's this and that and that.
But it should be less. I don't know.
No,
that is a good question, Elizabeth, for a librarian, because I do not know why that has happened. At some point, can we go over how to effectively apply inclusion exclusion criteria without manually looking through articles? So that is a good question. And usually the inclusion exclusion criteria is, and I'll just go to that slide. It's pretty general that people will do very similar ones. And it should be known from the literature. So it shouldn't be something that you have to go and look up. It should be something that you would already kind of know about the literature if you've read widely. If not, and you're brand new at the topic, it would pay to go and look and see if there are any other systematic reviews or meta-analysis on your topic and find out what they used.
So my main issue is that I'm looking at competition between the algae and the corals. But when I include competition as a keyword, I get a lot of results with competition between bacteria. But if I exclude bacteria completely, then I lose all of the papers that just mention it in passing.
In the abstract? Are you looking just in abstract, or are you looking?
I haven't been, so I wrote that down and I highlighted it.
That'll be why.
But it's still a lot of things that I don't necessarily need, but could potentially be mentioned.
Yeah, that's a good point. And this is why it would be really, really good for you at this stage to sit with a librarian, because they will be able to help you with that, and they will go through trials of searches, and they'll be like, well, there's too many here, and then they'll try a different strategy, and then they will, until they get the results that you want.
Do you know if they do video calls?
Beg your pardon? So, yes, they do. They definitely do online consultations. Okay, and I've done many in online consultations.
I'm very far away.
No, that's fine. So what you do is you book an appointment with a librarian and you send them your key search terms, kind of your inclusion criteria, so that they can play around with it before the meeting. And then they'll sit in the meeting and they'll do some search terms, or they'll show you what they came up with, and you can work together to exclude, include, change your Boolean operators around, And until you've found exactly what you're looking for, they're amazing. And they definitely do online consultations.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
No problem. No problem. Good one. That was a very good question. You can ask the parentheses question to the librarians as well. I don't know what it does if you change them. Louise has put up a link for Covidence. If someone wants to go look up prospero.com as well and put a link in from Prospero, which is the repository registry, that would be amazing. All right, so we will move on to doing your searches, and we might have a 5-minute break before we do that. So coming back at, what's the time?
The time is 3:17.
So maybe coming back at 25 past. So we can have a break, go get a coffee or a tea. Yeah. And I'll just mute us. Yeah. And we're not annoying everyone. And we'll come back and we'll workshop your own stuff, and you can ask me questions as we go through. Excellent. get started again. Okay, let's move that around. Okay, is everybody back?
Yes.
Okay, everyone is back.
Yes.
Excellent. So what we might do for the rest of the workshop for the last half an hour is to go through with your keywords and your topics. So we will start with developing your research question using a Pico or some form of other acronym. Some people might not have populations or problems. So we'll workshop some of that areas. Then we'll identify synonyms and related terms, identify the databases that are relevant to your research. Use truncation and Boolean operators to develop your search strategy or your key search terms. Identify your inclusion and exclusion criteria, and sort and store. We'll go through to sorting and storing the literature. So let's begin. So what I want you to do is I want you to start thinking about your Pico. What's your population, your intervention, your comparison, and your outcome for your current topic that you are most interested in? And I would like you to let me know, and I'm going to keep an eye on the chat this time because most people prefer to chat. And I might get you to put your Picos into the chat box. And then if you can, develop your Pico into a research question. So I'll give you a little bit of time to do that, to describe what your P, your I, your C, and your O is, and then to develop your research question with the Pico inside of it. Let's see how we go. If anyone has a question about their topic not having an element of the Pico, I will also answer questions about that in the chat box. All right, Valeria, let's have a chat about your topic. So not too sure about the intervention or the exposure. So why don't you tell me a little bit about your dolphin study?
Yeah, okay, just a second. I'm gonna move out from this room and I'll go to the other room.
Oh, okay, that's what I forgot.
It's okay, sure, okay. Okay, I can stay here. So my study, it's about abundance, distribution, and threats of 3 species. Where are you? I'm here. Can you see me as well? I put the video on.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, about these 3 species of dolphins. So when I'm looking at the intervention, basically I'm going how using different softwares and methodology, how is the population in that area.
Okay, so with your literature search, what are you trying to find out about the dolphins specifically?
I want to find out like if there are like gaps in the literature review or something. I mean, I know that this study has been done, so what we're doing is like more looking in a larger scale, like
Sure.
in a bigger area. And yeah, so my literature review would be, my review would be what? I don't know how to explain it. Did you get a little bit?
What are you
I'm
interested
trying
in
to
about
do?
the dolphins? So the population's easy. So it's dolphins on the east
Yeah.
coast of Queensland, Australia. So we've got the
Yeah,
population.
let's say that.
What are you interested in finding out about the dolphins?
If they are there, how many they are,
Oh, cool.
if I'm gonna find them, like the distribution.
Okay. So it's more like a
So
census type thing where you're looking at how many dolphins there
Yeah.
are on the east coast of Queensland, where they live. Do they stay there? Do they move?
yeah. As far as I know, there are no studies yet on that area that we are going to survey. So that's how the project is looking at. So on an area that there has not been studies about that yet.
Yeah. Cool.
So
you
how
would
can I
have
do the intervention?
So, and this is where I was talking before about how this is a very health-based criteria. So what you're really looking at is you're looking at more of a science-based criteria, less health.
Mhm.
So there isn't an intervention, which is completely fine, which means there's no comparison, but you're mainly looking at the population and the outcome. Like how many and where are they? And so
Yes.
even using population might be narrow enough in your search criteria to find papers, because I don't know how many papers there actually would be about dolphins and dolphins on the east coast of Queensland.
There are. I mean, all my supervisors have like a lot of them. But yeah, so I know there are papers on some areas on the coast of Queensland, but not in that bit that we are going to do the field work and eventually collect data and so on.
So you might even be worth just looking at population and potentially outcome.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not a hard and fast rule that you have to have an intervention and a comparator. Most of the time I leave comparator out for that reason. Because it's not useful. And then sometimes you won't even have an intervention if it's a very exploratory study of what is out there, then you might not even have the intervention. So you might just do population and outcome, or you might just even look at population. But you can do the exact same strategy, but just excluding those other elements of the Pico.
Okay. Thanks.
Nice. Let's have a go at trying it that way in the next couple of steps, and we'll see how many papers we get. All right, so in the chat box, I've got David, whose population is employees in proprietary companies that have less than 100 employees. The intervention is presence or establishment of an ESOP or an EOT. Don't know what that is. The comparison is obviously no ESOP or EOT, and outcome is staff retention or turnover or staff engagement. So I would highly recommend, David, doing two. Doing two for yours with two different outcomes.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Two separate searches would be amazing. What's ESOP?
Employee share ownership plans. And EOT is just kind of a version of that called an employee ownership trust, which, yeah, so it's looking at, I'm interested in the psychological engagement that occurs in workplace associated with the presence of this employee ownership plans.
Yeah, good. So, and I think that you would be very able to write a research question surrounding that, Pico, very easily. So it looks like your search strategy would be easy. You've got 2. The number of outcomes is how many systematic searches you do. So you've got 2 papers sitting there. That's what I usually think when I see 2 outcomes. Beautiful, 2 publications. Elizabeth, I think mine is more based on my experiment than the literature I'm looking for. Yep. So you might not need a literature review.
I was typing it out, but I can just tell you what the components I've come up with are.
Sure.
I mean, I have to go over the literature because I have to identify the gaps that are
makes
there. But so I was thinking my population would be the holobiont as a whole, which is the coral and the algal symbionts that inhabit it. My intervention would be the symbiont communities. So which types of symbionts are present and in which combination they're present, because that's what I'm changing. My comparison would be overall survival and fitness of the holobiont between infection treatments. So which infection treatment, survives better and is more fit. And then my outcome would be to determine the optimal community composition of symbionts that would maximize the fitness of the holobiont while retaining that community.
Perfect. Now that does sound like your experiment and not a systematic searching strategy. And this brings me to a very important part of the Pico. So the Pico needs to be keywords, not full sentences. So that does sound like an amazing experiment and a very well thought out and structured experiment. But when it comes to a systematic literature search, that would be a very, very narrow and probably not able to find anything in there. But that is a very good point to keep the Pico kind of keywords. Very good. Elizabeth. Louise, multidisciplinary. Oh, mine is multidisciplinary. Population is problem farmers. Oh, population problem is farmers, not problem farmers. Do you want to explain to me, Louise?
Hi. Well, I guess that at the beginning you were saying you had the Pico set up for quantitative research, and I'm doing a blend of quantitative and qualitative.
Yeah.
So then you had as your other option for the qualitative, because I took a note of that, was to have the
PIO,
a problem instead of population.
That's right.
The interest and then a context, then without an outcome.
Yes.
Doing interviews and that sort of thing. I'm not actually doing specific things to farmers, although there's lots of ideas on the internet.
Okay, so this makes a lot more sense now. So qualitative, the population is farmers. You're interested in their intuition about soil health management.
Yeah.
And you want to know their perceptions, their opinions, that's excellent.
Well, I'm specifically looking at decision making. And so I've already done a bit of reading. And so I've kind of honed it in onto intuition. So as a dominant driver.
Good. No, that's good. Perfect.
And so that's kind of that's like my core question for my overall arching question. And I am like retrofitting a question I've already developed into this, because I need to produce some literature reviews about some little ones for my papers.
And this looks really good, and you could easily turn this into a research question. So what are farmers' intuitions about soil health management?
Yeah. And so would I have an outcome in this context?
You don't need to, you can.
Yeah. Okay. Because like I thought, you know, I could look at it as the population, or I could look at it, which is farmers, or I could look at it as the problem, which is I didn't do a very good, I could have done another / and written, you know, soil, you know, decline, health decline or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks pretty good though, I think.
Yeah. So that if like whether they were in the right spots or not. Yeah.
I think they are.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Good job.
Great. Thank you.
Let's move on to the next stage, which is synonyms. So this is where we develop what are some synonyms for your key words. So some words that are similar to or mean the same thing. So I might give you 5 minutes to have a think about that, what your synonyms for your Pico might be, and then we will come back. Feel free to type them into the chat box and we will go through them again if you like. All right. Did anyone have any questions about identifying synonyms or related terms for their search? If not, we can move on to the next step in the process, which is identifying your relevant databases and your inclusion/exclusion criteria. So we might work on that. You can go back through the recording and follow along where I did the example in the library databases using your search terms once we send the recording out. So let's look at inclusion/exclusion criteria. So I'll give you another 5 minutes to write down what you think your inclusion/exclusion criteria are using those different criteria there on the screen. And I will come back and we will discuss if anyone has any questions about the inclusion/exclusion criteria. Feel free to pop your hand up and ask a question during the time as well. So I'll be sitting here waiting. Okay. Any questions about the inclusion/exclusion criteria and adopting it for your specific population or your specific search?
I guess that with my research, for my literature, like I'm looking at farmers.
Sure.
But my case study area is, you know, Central West New South Wales farmers.
Yep.
So I'm not going to find anything specifically on them. So I am looking at I was just looking at all farmers, including like, you know, American literature or whatever as well.
Yep.
I guess because particularly when I'm looking at farming practices and things that farmers do that impact soil. But yeah, I feel like I'm going to have a couple of different searches.
Yeah, and that's completely fine to have more than one.
Yeah.
And looking to see what the differences are between the papers that you get from one search and the papers from another search. That is completely fine to do.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Excellent. So the next stage is to create your search terms using your synonyms and put them into the parentheses with the ands and the ors. Keeping in mind, this is a really good spot to go and find the librarians and get them to look through with you and advise you. And then finally, putting everything from the full text into the data extraction. Feel free to copy the data extraction table that I have here. It's a very basic one. When you actually do a systematic literature review or you look at a systematic review, they'll have more detailed data extraction tables. But this is the main criteria or the main information that you need to be able to write the compare and contrast of a narrative review, the main points. Does anyone have any questions for me before we leave today? They are a bit quiet. That's okay. They might not have any questions. Yeah. That is perfectly fine. Well, thank you everybody for coming today and for sitting through my workshop. If you do have any questions at any stage, you can email me at emily@bond.edu.au. If you're interested in seeing how my reviews are structured or want to read any of my reviews, then you can have a look on my website. I've got all my publications on there. They'll give you a little bit of a template on how to write a method section for a review or how to write a literature review in a similar way to what I've described today. You can also follow me on Twitter, where I do all of my fun academic tweeting as well.
All right, well, thanks everybody. We'll wrap it up there. Megan's kindly going to leave us her PowerPoint slides so I can send them out to you if you're interested. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you for coming along.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll finish up
Have a good weekend.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.